proceed.
Your Honor.
And state you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. First of all, thank you for your time and attention yesterday. I know it was a long day, and also thank everybody for coming back. We can't do this process without you, so we give you our sincere thanks. The evidence in this case will show that on or about April 24th of 2018, the defendant killed his wife, Shanti Cooper Tronnes. You're going to hear from the medical examiner in this case, and he's going to tell you what the cause of death was. You're going to hear that Shanti Cooper Tronnes was beaten to death and she was strangled. You're going to hear that she was hit with such a force that she had 2 fractures to her skull, and that her hyoid bone in her throat was broken as well. You're going to hear that her ear was pulled to the point of being torn, almost torn off. And you're going to see photos and hear evidence of multiple burst blood vessels, known as TPI, is the telltale sign of strangulation. And that's how Shanti Cooper Tronnes died, at the hand of her death. So how did we get to this point? Well, David Tronnes and Shanti Cooper Tronnes met online back in 2013. At the time, David Tronnes was still living in Minnesota. Both were coming out of previous marriages, and they took to each other quickly. David Tronnes moved to Florida to be with Shanti within the same year that they had met online. Now, David had a successful career in Minnesota. He'd saved a fair amount of money. And so when he moved to Florida, he was able to purchase a beautiful, large home in the Delaney Park area of Orlando. He paid cash for this home, about $600,000. And the house at the time was livable. It was an older house, but the plan was that he was going to purchase the house, they would live in the house, and then eventually do renovations and modernize and open up the home as they lived there. Now, when he purchased the home, it was purchased with a trust that included himself and his mother. Importantly, someone who was not included in that trust and in that ownership of the home was Shanti Cooper Tronnes. So, the Tronnes moved into the house along with Shanti's son Jackson, and at first, the home was livable. Just got deeper and deeper into this, what would become a money pit. Now, you'll hear that from the time that David Tronnes moved to Florida, to Orlando, that he never worked the entire time. Meanwhile, you'll hear that Shanti worked almost nonstop. She had a financial and accounting consulting business, and she worked from sun up to sundown. You'll hear how hard of a worker she was and what she did to support her family. Now, so during this time, as she was the only source of income, and the defendant hadn't worked the entire time he was in Florida, that she was the sole breadwinner for the household and for the expenses. So while Shanti was working, and she largely worked from home, David would take care of the yard and the pool and the dogs. So in early 2017, David and Shanti were married. Also in early 2017, the real meat of the renovation, or ultimately destruction of the home, took place. It got to the point that the interior portion of the home, the living room, the kitchen, all of the main areas were completely gutted, unlivable, down to the studs. And you're going to hear in this case that at some point the destruction of the home became so complete that there was concerns about its structural soundness to even do continued work on it. Now you'll hear that during this time, as the house became progressively more and more unlivable, that caused an obvious tension in the relationship. You'll hear that David and Shanti would argue and bicker about the home and the construction and what was going on, and her not having any ownership in the home. you're going to hear that the home deteriorated to the point that there was only 2 livable spaces in the home. There was the upstairs bedroom, which sort of served as a 1-bedroom apartment that had its own bathroom, and in that bedroom, Shanti lived with her son Jackson, who had a bunk bed type bed up there. And then in the garage area, there was a room, and that's where David Tronnes lived. And during this time, they weren't sleeping in the same bedroom, they weren't sleeping in the same bed, they weren't even sleeping in the same wing of the house. And this had gone on for a long period of time. There was hope on the horizon, though, because David heard about this show called Zombie House Flipping, and a person named Keith Ory, who was put in touch with, who was involved in the show. And Keith Ory came out and looked at the home. Now, the first time you're going to hear that he came and looked at the home, it seemed like, it was early in the process, it seemed like a normal construction. There wasn't any interest for the television show. But several months later, when David got back in touch with Mr. Ory, it had deteriorated to a point it was something like he'd never seen. And at this point, Keith Ory thought this could be something that could be on the show. This is such a severe demolition of this home that this could be something that could be on the Zombie House Flipping show. Now, being on the Zombie House Flipping show didn't provide the Tronnes with any kind of paycheck for being on the show, but there were benefits to being on the show. Trade-outs, upgrades to the construction. So, it was a value that could help with $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 towards the house. And so this was, in a way, sort of a lifeline. But it came with a catch. The problem was, in order to be on the show, there was a production schedule. And obviously, the house had been sitting destroyed for essentially about a year at this point. Then in early 2018, they had to make a decision, the Tronnes, to pause construction, which had just started again, and leave their house essentially in this demolished state in order to be on the show, which wasn't going to begin production for several months, or to continue with the construction and not be able to be on the show. So ultimately, the decision was made to go forward with the show, which again paused the construction, leaving the home in complete disrepair for several months. Now, you'll see that this led to further frustration. On top of the home frustration and constantly working that Shanti was doing to bring in all of the money coming into the household, in early 2018, she also suffered from appendicitis, which caused her a great difficulty. She had some complications afterwards, and for several months, she was in pain and she was perhaps more irritable than she had been in the past. And it wasn't until close to in time to when this murder happened, you'll hear that she actually started to get back to herself and normality. So you're going to hear from Keith Ory. He's going to tell you, as a production that goes forward for a network, there's costs and considerations involved. And if you're going to sink a lot of money into this production, you want to know that the people involved are going to to stick with the project, because you don't want to invest a lot of money in something that ends up not happening. So because of this, he wanted to make sure that Dave and Shanti were on the same page. And he required a sit-down with both of them to make sure they understood how the production was going to go, what was expected, and that there wasn't going to be any surprises, or they weren't going to pull out, be any issues. Well, he had a hard time getting this scheduled with Dave, you're going to hear. And finally, he at his insistence said, no, we cannot go forward with this production unless this happens. He was able to set a time about a week before Shanti's murder, and he came over to the house to meet with both Dave and Shanti. And you're going to hear that at that meeting at first, Dave tried to go forward without Shanti. Shanti was there. She was upstairs in her office/apartment that she lived in this home, and she didn't even want to come down and be part of the meeting. You're going to hear he had to go up there several times, try to get her to come down. Eventually, reluctantly, he was able to get her to come down, and you're going to hear her demeanor at that time. She was not into this. You're going to hear this is not something that she was involved in. Keith Orey was trying to explain the project. She was dismissive. She wouldn't sit down. She didn't want anything to do with this meeting or him or what was being planned with the show. She came down, listened for a few minutes, and then went back upstairs before the meeting was even complete. This is a week before her murder. This home show, this zombie house flipping, was the lifeline out of this mess with this house that they've dug themselves into. And she, at that point, a week before her murder, was not into it. So I want to take you to Monday night, April 23rd of 2018. Shanti's son Jackson, from a previous marriage, was not staying with them that night. He was staying with his father, Jim Cooper. So the house in Delaney Park was just Shanti and Dave. There was nobody else there. Now you're going to see through phone records that throughout that evening, Shanti was active as she normally was on her phone. She was receiving and sending text messages, phone calls. She had a step tracker on her phone. It showed her moving around as it did, most days, throughout the day. And she was active into that evening. You're going to see that evening she had a short phone call with her son that would be their last phone call. And you're going to see the step tracker on her phone stops. There's no other movement after about 11:30, 11:25, 11:30 on April 23rd. So this is where we get into Dave's story. So you're going to hear what his story was to law enforcement. And according to him, you're going to hear that on April 23rd into the early morning of April 24th, at some point he separated. He went down to his bedroom in the garage with the dogs and left her in that upstairs apartment bedroom, and they both went to bed. And then the morning of April 24th, 2018, according to Dave, Shanti, who you'll hear was an occasional cigarette smoker, came down the stairs, and there's an area by a pool that they had, and she sat outside there and she smoked a cigarette. And you're going to hear, according to Dave, that about 9:15 in the morning is when that happened. She came down, they spoke briefly. She talked about how she may not go to a dentist appointment that she had made for that morning the day before, and that she went back upstairs to work and to decide what she was going to do with the rest of her day. Now, at this point, at about 9:20, 9:25, according to Dave, you're going to hear that he walks the dogs. There's a couple dogs that he walked, a brief walk around the neighborhood, 10, 15 minutes at that point. Let him use the bathroom, came back, and then he came back, did some yard work, and then, according to Dave, cleaned up the pool, and then he proceeded to decide after maybe an hour or so earlier, walking the dogs, that he was going to take the dogs to a park. This time about 11:45 that morning. So he decides to take the dogs to this park, and according to Dave, they go to this park. They get there about 12 o'clock. They stay about an hour and 45 minutes at this park. During that time, he makes no phone calls. He receives no phone calls. He doesn't look at anything on his phone. That hour and 45 minutes that the dogs are at this park. And then, according to Dave, he came back about 1:45 and got back to the house maybe 2 o'clock. Now, nowhere in this time is he texting Shanti? Is he calling Shanti? Is he going upstairs to, see if she's had lunch, see what they're doing? Just talk like a married couple typically would at this time. Nowhere during this day does that happen, and that's borne out by the phone records. And also borne out by his statement that you're going to hear, that he didn't go up to check on her at any point in the day. And even when he got back from his 2-hour trip to the park with the dogs, about an hour after walking the dogs, did he think to go up there and check on her or anything like that. So then you're going to hear, according to Dave, that when he came back, he did some more yard work, he cleaned the pool again, and then, at that point, after taking some measurements and things around the house, it became time to see who was going to pick up Jackson. And so, at this point, he finally decides he's going to go up and he's going to see what's going on, and that, he's going to check and see who's picking up Jackson that afternoon. So he starts to go upstairs. He hears, according to Dave, a trickle of water coming from the tub, calls out for Shanti, doesn't hear anything, continues to go up into the bathroom, and it's at this point that he finds Shanti partially submerged in the tub, her sort of face and arm in, the rest of her body sort of out of the tub, and at that point, he thinks she's fallen, he panics, he pulls her out of the tub, he tries to pick her up, but he is unable to pick up this 130-pound woman who had recently lost, as you'll hear, weight from her appendix injury. He's unable to pick her up, so he has to drag her out of the tub over next to the bed, and for some reason, you'll hear, that he decided to move the sheets off the bed and put that on the ground on the floor, and then put her body on those sheets. At this point, he calls 911. He has, apparently attempted CPR, according to Dave, on Shanti at this point, which you'll hear makes no sense, because when first responders came just after this, you'll hear that she was already in rigor mortis, which isn't something that happens just after death. This is something that happens, after several hours at least. And rigor mortis means the stiffening of the body. At the point in the story that he says he performed CPR, she would have already been experiencing rigor mortis and obviously dead. And that's what the evidence will show. But on the phone call with 911, you'll hear him talking about attempting CPR and seeming very upset, hysterical. But you'll also hear on the 911 call that when he's asked specific questions, like an address or a phone number or something like that to the first responders, he's able to collect himself, give that information, and then immediately go back to the hysteria that you hear or you will hear on the 911 call. So first responders and the medical examiner investigator come to the scene, and you'll hear from them that they could immediately tell this wasn't a fall. This was a violent attack. There are multiple injuries. There's blood all over her face, a huge wound. There's bruising around her neck. There's petechia that you can see. There's scrapes on her legs from being drugged. And you're going to hear all those things. You're going to hear that the house was searched and that there were no signs of forced entry or a burglary or some sort of home invasion robbery. There's cash around. There's valuable electronics. Her phone is sitting on the nightstand next to a diamond earring that she had taken out and put on the nightstand. None of that's touched. None of that's taken, you'll hear. And, so there's no signs of any kind of burglary or robbery. Now, you are going to hear that Shanti was very proud of and known to wear a nice engagement ring. that David had gotten her the year before. And then a wedding band once they were subsequently married after that. She would always wear it. She always had it on. And you're going to hear that when the medical examiner took possession of that body and when first responders were right on scene, that ring was not on her hand. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So when investigators and detectives were looking over the home, they noticed that the tub wasn't overflowing, although apparently it had been, dripping water for a period of time. Shanti's clothes were oddly just slightly damp, as opposed to soaking wet of somebody that had recently been, submerged, at least the top part of their body, in a tub. You're going to hear about the evidence found on scene, like fingerprints. The only fingerprints found around the tub in this scene were Shanti's and Dave's. And you're going to get to hear about the positioning of those fingerprints. You're going to get to hear about the DNA in this case and how there's no other DNA other than the people that lived in that house. You're going to get to hear all that. We're going to be calling, upwards of 25 witnesses in this case that you're going to get to hear from. So another thing that you're going to hear about in this case is, who was Shanti Cooper? Shanti was a loving mother to Jackson, and she was an extremely hard worker who was responsive, almost to a fault, to her clients. She had a work is very important attitude. And so when she received a work-related text, you're going to hear she was Johnny on the spot. I mean, she responded within minutes, not hours or, certainly like later in the day. She was a get back with you immediately type person. In fact, you're going to hear that she was so much so that way that she, had a mentee that she had worked with, and that's something that she trained her on, the importance of being responsive, immediately responsive to clients. That's something that can set you apart in business. And so that's something that she lived by. And you're going to hear that on the morning of April 24th, she received a work text from somebody that she consulted with at 6:58 a.m. about a financial management software that she consulted on. And you're going to see that that text message was never read or responded to. 6:58 a.m. You're going to see that she had another text message a little bit later in the morning after 10 on another work-related matter, never read or responded to. In fact, you're going to hear that Shanti never sent or read another text message after the 9th of November 23rd, or April 23rd, 2018. Nothing. A lot of incoming, no outgoing. That's what the evidence will show. You're going to hear that her emergency dental appointment that she made on the day before, on April 23rd, because she broke a tooth, and that she wanted as soon as she could get the next day at 10 a.m. on April 24th, no call, no show. Didn't go to the appointment. You're going to hear from people that knew her that is out of character for the responsible person that Shanti Cooper Tronnes was. So I talked a little bit about, but you're going to hear also some more about what Dave said when he spoke with police and what was said to him. In the interview, police told him this was not a fall because, it starts out seeming that he believed this was some sort of fall. She had been sick, maybe she fell. He said, look, this is not a fall. This was a violent attack. In addition to having multiple injuries in multiple places, she was clearly strangled. He was told this. But what did he do with that information? So after he was released from questioning, the next day and the days that followed, he spoke with some of Shanti's friends, some of Shanti's colleagues, and broke the news to them about what happened. And in his stories, you will hear about that he told them he still was making this sound like it was some sort of accident. There was no mention of strangulation or anything like that, even though he knew that at the time. He was told that. But when he's telling people what happened, left out. So Shanti's engagement ring. Talked a little bit about that earlier. She had a very nice ring, you'll hear. She was proud of it. She posted about it on Facebook. She wore it all the time. Well, as I said, the ring was not on her when she was found. And while there was no signs of home invasion or burglary, there was a question with law enforcement: where's the ring? Where is this, expensive, nice engagement ring? Well, you're going to hear that ring was ultimately found in a search warrant in August of 2018, a few months later, of David Tronnes' mother's house that he was now living in. And it was found in a bag in David Tronnes' room. The evidence will show that he pried that engagement ring off his wife's lifeless body, knew he did it, told the police that the ring should still be on her hand, all the while, months later, he had it. When you've heard all the evidence in this case, you will conclude that the only reasonable explanation for Shanti's death is sitting right there. David Tronnes killed Shanti Cooper. He did it with a premeditated design. He intended to do it, he did it, and he's guilty of first-degree murder. Thank you.
Thank you, State. Defense?
Your Honor, defense is going to reserve opening statement until its case.
Thank you.
Thank you.